It's Horse Beef here. What's going on, everybody? I want to talk about the best win streaks or greatest win streaks of all time. Now, that's a combination of the names on the win streak, right? The length of win streak. You know what I mean? Like, there are multiple variables here. It isn't a simple thing to really come to the conclusion of. It isn't just about the length of the streak, because if that was the case, then it would just be an objective thing. But no, this is very much subjective. You can disagree. You can agree on this. It's just how I weigh it up, guys, and you're free to let me know in the comment section below whether you agree, you disagree, and this was very much inspired by Merab's recent victory, and just taking a look at the win streak he's put together with those names on it, right? One of the best win streaks of all time, but I want to see where he stacks up to the rest of these guys throughout UFC history, man. So let's just get into it right now. The first one here that I picked out was Ruthless Robbie Lawler. Now, this has a lot to do with his title reign. Mostly, it's pretty much his title reign as a whole, although I did include the Jake Ellenberger win there. So we have Matt Brown after that. Johnny Hendricks, right? And this is juiced up Johnny Hendricks as well. Juiced up Johnny Hendricks. He beat him. Great fight, by the way. Fantastic fight. Split decision, but I believe he deserved it there. The Matt Brown win before that is not too shabby either. But then he goes on to defend against Rory McDonald in an amazing fight. And then you have Carlos Condit, right, in an amazing fight that he arguably actually should have lost, right? Carlos Condit was arguably robbed there. But those last three wins in particular, Johnny Hendricks, Rory McDonald, and Carlos Condit, those are three of the best title fights of all time, right? So I think the fact that Robbie Lawler delivered us probably the most violent title reign of any fighter of all time. Any fighter. Like, I'm not talking about him just brutally finishing people. I'm talking about the nature of his fights. His fights were wars, right? Those three fights up there were all-time wars. So I believe that elevates the win streak, but there is a robbery in there somewhere, right? And I would say it's one of the more famous robberies, especially when it comes to title fights. So for that reason, it's also not a long win streak either, but those top three names, just the way that he delivered such entertaining scraps as the champion, right? He fought like the defending champion each and every time. No fear. Didn't change his style because he became a champion. But the robbery, I'll say because of that fact, and just because it's not the longest win streak in the world, we will say C tier, but nonetheless still one of the most impressive win streaks of all time. And then we have Francis Ngannou. Man, the win streak that made him arguably the best heavyweight of all time. I mean, like, is it fair to say that he's the best of all time? We have Curtis Blades, Cain Velasquez. The Curtis Blades win, very impressive, of course. Great overhand knockout in the first round. The Cain Velasquez win is a bit strange. I don't know. It was Cain coming off a long layoff, and he kind of did his knee in, but it was a shot that landed. So I think it was a legitimate TKO. And the Cain Velasquez, the name, but the circumstances, the long layoff and all that. So maybe not the most impressive win that you could have over Cain, but then he knocks out Junior Dos Santos. There's, Rosenstrike, Stipe Miocic knockout. A lot of people were picking Stipe to replicate what he did to Ngannou the first time. So that was a big shock. Ngannou looked so good in that fight, man. Easily the scariest version that we've seen of his. Then he goes and beats Ciryl Gane. That, honestly speaking, wasn't a very impressive win. And then Renan Ferreira in PFL. And Renan Ferreira, you can say he's trash, just a PFL fighter. But I can honestly speak and see Renan Ferreira coming into the UFC and knocking out most of these tubby-ass heavyweights anyway. So that, in and of itself, added on to his win streak is very impressive in a different organization. I like that. But you have a couple, like, all-time greats in heavyweight, right? You have Cain Velasquez, although I did say the circumstances are a little bit, iffy. JDS, Stipe Miocic. Ciryl Gane's been up there for a few years now. Renan Ferreira is well in a different organization. Curtis Blades has been in around the top for a while. Is this one deserving of being an A tier? Right? He did knock out Prime Stipe. Was it Prime JDS? Maybe not. Prime Velasquez? Definitely not. For now, I'm actually going to put this one at B tier. Then we get into Max Holloway. Now, I'll put him at A tier as things stand right now, but I'm not exactly sure how to rank it. It's a tough one for Max Holloway. He's had a few very nice, impressive, long win streaks against top competition. Like, truly impressive competition here, right? Cub Swanson, followed by Charles Oliveira with the esophagus injury. But this was 145 Charles Oliveira. He was not even anywhere near the Charles Oliveira that he is now, or was maybe a couple of years ago. But then again, it's an impressive win, I guess, but we shouldn't act like this is the Charles Oliveira. Jeremy Stephens, underrated win, I would say. at any stage in Jeremy Stephens' career. Ricardo Lamas was a good win at the time as well, right? They had that last 10-second moment where he banged with him in the pocket. Anthony Pettis, and this wasn't really washed up Anthony Pettis either. This is when he could make 145, dude. So he was still pretty dedicated to the sport. 2 TKOs over Jose Aldo, followed by a win over Brian Ortega, and those weren't washed Jose Aldo victories either. Yes, they were after the KO loss to Conor McGregor, but that was not washed Jose Aldo by any means, because I'm not even sure we've seen a washed Jose Aldo, maybe up until recently against Ayman Zahabi. But it's a fantastic win streak. There are some huge names on there. If you go just based off like Charles Oliveira, Anthony Pettis, 2 Jose Aldo wins, Brian Ortega, it's good. It's a very good win streak, right? It's a very good win streak, sorry. But is it deserving of being above B tier? For me, no. I would say it's on par with Francis Ngannou's win streak. For me personally, it's a little bit top heavy, and some of the bigger names on it are there's asterisks there. However you say that word pluralized, I'll never fucking know. Then we get Ilia Topuria, and this is a very fresh one and also a very short win streak as well. But I think nonetheless he's worth a little mention here, just based off of the last couple of wins, right? He just knocked out Volkanovski and Max Holloway back-to-back. Max Holloway, in which had never been knocked out or even officially knocked down in his career. Before that, Josh Emmett, okay, alrighty, that's all right. Josh Emmett, I suppose. Bryce Mitchell, all right. It's very top heavy, right? Very, very top heavy. But I think as Ilia Topuria goes on to extend this win streak, if he is to knock out Charles Oliveira, then it's instantly bumped up a spot, I would say, for sure. But I would say just the fact that he knocked out the 2 greatest 145ers of all time back to back just elevates it so much. So I will say, is it worth C tier? It could actually be a D tier win streak, really, when you think about it. Like, compared to the rest of these dudes, this could even be a D tier win streak, because like, who else goes in D tier, really? I'll put him C tier for now, and that's only really based off of the length, but we could end up moving him down, because realistically, I don't know who goes in D tier. We will probably have to do a reshuffle of this pretty soon. Then we get Dricus du Plessis. Now, this one is actually very, very impressive, like extremely impressive. Extremely impressive. The last few wins that he's picked up, right? Think about it. Sean Strickland has been a tough nut to crack for everybody at 185, except for DDP. And of course, Alex Pereira, who just has that one-hitter-quitter power. Israel Adesanya, one of the best 185ers of all time, who he choked out. Right? The first fight with Strickland was very close, but then he made it very clear that he was better than Strickland the second time around. Robert Whittaker, another one of the greatest 185ers of all time, TKO'd him. TKO'd Derek Brunson in a banger fight. Darren Till, Brad Tavares before that. Right? So I would say this, the last 4 victories are doing a lot of heavy lifting, but it's an amazing run of wins right there. Although I just can't say that it's any more impressive than these 2 that I put at B tier right here. So we will leave it there for now. And then we get Merab Dvalishvili, and I'm going to put him in S tier to get things started off. We may end up moving it down depending on how I see other win streaks on this list. But as things stand, dude, it's hard to look at his win streak and not be incredibly impressed by it. Just the names, right? Marlon Moraes at that time, I think that was right after he had lost to Henry Cejudo. So it's not like Marlon Moraes was totally washed at that point. And he looked really good in that fight, and the comeback from Merab was incredibly impressive. Then he had that very boring performance over Jose Aldo, but deserved victory. And then Peter Yan, man, put a beat down on him. And of course, I could bring up the apparent injury that Peter Yan has or had in that fight, but I don't think it matters, man, because Merab always goes into fights injured, so it's never an excuse. So for me, that's a great win over Peter Yan anyway. Henry Cejudo, so you could say a little bit washed up, Henry Cejudo was, right? You could say that. But maybe it's a bit disingenuous because Henry did look pretty good in that fight, and I think Merab just did to him what he does to everybody. He made him fade, right? And it shouldn't be a surprise at that point. I don't know if that means that he was washed exactly. Then he goes and beats Sean O'Malley to win the belt, and then goes and beats Umar Nurmagomedov, who everyone is picking against him and saying he's a nightmare matchup, went and babied him in their fight, and then goes on to solidify his dominance with a submission over Sean O'Malley just this past weekend. What a win streak that is. Champion, double champion, future champion, Umar Nurmagomedov, one of the best of all time, according to Joe Rogan's delusional ass. And then, of course, another win over Sean O'Malley. It's a fantastic win streak, but the more I'm looking at it, the more I'm going to say A tier for that one. It is one of the greatest runs of wins of all time. I would say that he has some of the best wins that you could even have on the resume as a 135er. It's an incredible run. So for now, we will put it at A tier. But then we have Islam Makhachev. Now, I'll stick him at A tier for now while we really figure out where to put him, because I'm not too sure. This is a very, very, very tough placement for me. I'm not too sure how I rate his win streak. Of course, there are some very, very big names on the win streak. Leading up to the title fight, of course, he did get the title shot off of that win over Bobby Green, which is interesting to say the least. I would say at the very least, very interesting. Not sure I believe that he deserved the shot off of that alone. But Drew Dober, it's a good win. Underrated maybe, but at the same time, maybe back then that was a good win, but I guess Drew Dober was always destined to be kind of a journeyman in a way. Thiago Moises, he's always a good grappler, and he did take Islam to the 4th round before he submitted him, but it's a win over Thiago Moises. It's an okay win, I suppose. Dan Hooker, when it's aged well, but at that time, Dan Hooker was not in the best spell of his career, really. And it was on short notice. If I'm correct, let me know. I'm pretty sure it was on short notice. Then, as I said, the Bobby Green fight, I think also on short notice. So you would expect him to beat Bobby Green, really. Then he goes and he beats Charles Oliveira. Very dominant performance. Very impressive performance. He beat Charles Oliveira in all aspects. And at that time, Charles Oliveira was seen as a nightmare matchup for Islam, and Islam proved that is not the case. Jiu-Jitsu is just inferior to Sambo. Then a very nice win over Volkanovski. I don't consider it to be a robbery. Many people do, so that might detract a little bit from the win streak itself. Then another win over Volkanovski, the head kick. It looks great on paper. As I always say, love handles on Volk. The man had love handles. It's tough to rate that win streak very highly. That win very highly. And then Dustin Poirier after a knockout loss and then a win over BSD. Not sure he deserved to be in there in the first place. So once again, it's a great name to have on the resume. And honestly speaking, Dustin Poirier looked great that night. Right? He looked great that night. So it's hard to say that it's not an impressive win because Dustin didn't just get dusted. You know what I'm saying? And then Moicano, another short notice defense, but it was still dominant as it should be, even though he probably got dropped in that first round. But he finished it in under a minute, right? He made it look dominant as you should in that type of a fight, right? Against someone who shouldn't be in there with you in the first place. So, I'm looking at it. You see a couple of really, really great fighters. Volkanovski's name on there, Dustin Poirier's name on there, Charles Oliveira on there. But I think a couple of those names are doing a whole lot of heavy lifting. There are a lot of short notice fights, which, Islam himself isn't to blame, but then again, a lot of short notice fights here. I'll put it B. I think B tier is fair enough for Islam's current run right now. But then speaking of Dustin Poirier, man, we got Dustin Poirier coming in next. And he's pretty much only here because he ran the gauntlet of violence and reigned supreme at that time, right? Anthony Pettis, maybe he's not involved in that gauntlet of violence exactly, but Justin Gaethje TKO, Eddie Alvarez TKO, but then Max Holloway, right, came up. He didn't really look exactly in shape for 155. Looked like he just blew himself up a little bit, looked a little bit bloated out there. But it was still a great fight, and Dustin Poirier more than deserved to win it. So just that string of 4 wins right there. It's an impressive win streak, but it's short. It is short. The Max Holloway one maybe isn't as impressive as it could be if he beats this version of Max Holloway, the version that we saw against Justin Gaethje, right? The frame, the way that he filled out and put on that muscle, then I'd be very impressed, especially at the end of Dustin Poirier's career. But as far as win streaks go, D tier is the best I can do for that one there. But then we have Aljamain Sterling, and it is tough to actually downplay Aljamain Sterling's win streak. Like, whether you're a fan of his or not, man, just based off the names alone, but we will, of course, get into the specifics there. But just look at this win streak right here. You have Corey Sandhagen, who's been in and around the top of the division for a long time now. Seems to always fail when he gets to the very top, right? But he submitted him in the first round, just made easy work of him. Back-to-back wins over Peter Yan, but one he was getting babied in, and then gets the disqualification, followed by a split decision win over Peter Yan, which Peter Yan could have, been given justifiably. Then a TKO over TJ Dillashaw with a dislocated shoulder. But of course, it's not Aljamain Sterling's fault. And I'm not saying that any of this is his fault. But then he had a really good performance, or a really good fight with Henry Cejudo. That was also a very close split decision that he could have lost. So based off of the names alone, it's a very good win streak. But circumstances, right? Asterisks are just bumping it down quite a bit for me. So for that reason, just based off the asterisks on Aljamain Sterling's win streak, and this isn't to say that it's a bad win streak. Like I said, this is between the greatest win streaks of all time. These are all the best win streaks in my opinion. I may have missed a few. Who knows, right? I'm not a fucking computer. I don't remember every win streak known to man. But I think because of the asterisks, right, the 2 Petr Yan wins could have easily been losses for him. The Henry Cejudo fight was very close. I recommend watching it back. It was actually very close, like extremely close. Could have went Henry's way. So I'm going to say, like, if we're just basing off the names alone, it could be A tier up there with Merab's. But I think because of the nature of some of those wins, not that it's Aljo's fault, but he was fortunate with some of those wins there. But then we move into Stipe Miocic, arguably the greatest heavyweight of all time. And when you look at the way that this win streak actually has aged, man, he beat some of the best heavyweights of all time on this run. Like, look at that. Mark Hunt, not that he's one of the best of all time, but he TKO'd Mark Hunt, TKO'd Andrei Arlovski, TKO'd Fabricio Verdum, who's a very underrated fighter and one of the best heavyweights of all time in his own right, TKO'd Alistair Overeem, another one of these legendary heavyweights, right, who was just unfortunate to be fighting during the same era as Ngannou and Stipe Miocic. JDS, another one of the best heavyweights of all time, who will also be on this list. And Francis Ngannou. Not many fighters can say that they have a win over Francis Ngannou, especially while actually fighting Francis Ngannou, unlike Derek Lewis, for example. My voice just cracked. That was fucking stupid. But yeah, it's a fantastic win streak. It's actually quite legendary. It may be one of the greatest runs of all time, just those last 4 wins alone, right? You have 4 of the most legendary heavyweights that you can have on the resume, right? Ooh, is it more impressive than Ngannou's? Like, I guess Ngannou does have Cain Velasquez. He has that win over him, and he also did have Stipe, right? But Stipe also has Ngannou. They both have JDS. It's very tough. It's very tough. But I'm going to say that Stipe Miocic's win streak is A tier. I think the Fabricio Verdum knockout elevates this because Fabricio Verdum is such an underrated fighter. But then we have Matt Hughes. Now this one is one that many may not even really think about when you think about the best win streaks of all time, but just look at the names on this, man. Georges St-Pierre. He delivered an armbar finish over Georges St-Pierre in the first round, then a rear naked choke win over Frank Trigg, followed by a Kimura victory over Joe Riggs, he's a legend, a lesser-known legend, but he's a legend of the sport nonetheless. Royce Gracie, TK over Royce Gracie, who, listen, I'm not a big fan of the Gracies. I don't really care for that jiu-jitsu style. It was way outdated even at that point. Like, Matt Hughes was so much bigger than him, physically imposing. Like, I'm not overly impressed by the win over Royce Gracie, and then he TKOs BJ Penn. So for me, it's like you have such legendary names on there. GSP, Joe Riggs, Frank Trigg, Royce Gracie, BJ Penn, right? Just BJ Penn and GSP on there. Having GSP on there alone is enough to elevate it, but very top heavy, right? BJ Penn and GSP does a lot of heavy lifting there. I know Royce Gracie is a name, but I'm not overly impressed by the name. So I will say, as far as win streaks go, legendary win streaks, this is D tier on this list, but that is no knock to how impressive some of those wins really are, right? But then we get into the man himself, GSP. Now, I'm just going to stick him at S tier because I assume I won't convince myself of anything else. Let's just take a look here. And this may not even be his entire win streak at that time, but I believe it is. Josh Koscheck then submits Matt Hughes to get revenge, right? Matt Serra gets revenge as well. Revenge. John Fitch ends his 16-fight win streak, who was also on this list, by the way, right? TKO, doctor stoppage, or corner stoppage against BJ Penn. Just dominates the steroid freak Thiago Alves, beats Dan Hardy, beats Josh Koscheck again, beats Jake Shields, Carlos Condit in a deserving victory as well, Nick Diaz, juiced up Johnny Hendricks, who some people think that he was robbed there. I personally disagree. I think it was a very close fight, but you can give it to GSP. Absolutely takes retirement, or takes a long hiatus, you could say it was, but it was retirement at that time. Comes back to fight probably the most unthreatening middleweight champion he could have came back to win the belt against, but he did win the fight by submission. This win streak to me is just simply too legendary to put anywhere below S tier. This may be the greatest win streak of all time. He cleaned out his division. This is what cleaning out a division looks like. Look at those names. Look at the variety of names. John Fitch, Matt Serra, Matt Hughes, Koscheck, Thiago Alves, Dan Hardy. This is what clearing the division looks like, right? Before you try and tell me that Islam Makhachev cleared his division, take a look at that resume. That's what clearing the division looks like, ladies and gentlemen. That's exactly what it looks like here. But then we get into Shogun Rua. Now this may be a controversial one, maybe very controversial, because it's only a run of 4 victories. But for me, this 2005 run for Shogun Rua was just so legendary, so legendary. TKOs Rampage Jackson, TKOs Antonio Nogueira, and then in the same night, TKO's Alistair Overeem and Ricardo Arona to win this Pride Grand Prix. Man, I just have so much more respect for fighters who put together long win streaks like this during the tournament days, because these guys were forced to fight multiple times in one night at times. And this in particular, just like the rap sheet right there, to beat all those guys, to win a Grand Prix, it's just so impressive. It's undeniably so legendary, and that year is one of the greatest years that any fighter has ever had, in my opinion. But it's only a run of 4 wins, so I will bring it down to A tier. But just the names and the fact that he ran through those guys to win a tournament, dude. Murderer's Row. And he beat Alistair and Ricardo Arona on the same night, man. TKO'd them both. Beautiful. Then we get Volkanovski. Now I'm going to stick him at A tier as things stand. Let's see where we end up with that one. But as far as I'm concerned, he has a very, very nice win streak. His whole reign, like Volkanovski's first reign as champion, is so legendary, right? Chad Mendes, a TKO over Chad Mendes, man, that was such a sick fight. Go back and watch that fight. Volkanovski was just walking down Chad Mendes, eating big shots, man. TKO'd him. Beautiful boxing, ripping to the body. It was such a great performance. You followed it up with a win over Jose Aldo, right? Not washed up Jose Aldo by any means. And then 2 back-to-back wins over Max Holloway. You could say the second one was a robbery. I would disagree with you, right? When I watched the fight live, I thought, okay, he dropped him in the first 2 rounds. No way he can lose the fight, right? Those are 10-8s, but that's not how MMA works. It's not always 10-8s, and Volkanovski arguably did enough to win those last 3 rounds, and then beats Brian Ortega. You know what? TKZ, I'm not overly impressed with that one. Chan Sung Jung took it on short notice, I believe. Somebody pulled out. I forget who it was. It might have been Max Holloway or what? Who was it? You guys let me know who it was. I don't actually remember. But Chan Sung Jung, TKO'd him. I don't put that. Like, I don't rank that win very highly. But then another victory, and this one, the most dominant victory that he put up over Max Holloway. Wow, what a performance that was. So I would say Chad Mendes, Jose Aldo, and 3 over Max Holloway. But Brian Ortega, Chan Sung Jung, I don't rank it that highly. Brian Ortega, I understand that he fought for the belt many times, but who's his best win? Who's his best win, right? Who the fuck is his best win? He doesn't have a very impressive resume. So I would say that Chad Mendes, Jose Aldo, and the 3 Max Holloway wins are doing a lot of heavy lifting here. Having said that, I'm still going to rank it at A tier. I think it's a very impressive win streak. It really is an impressive win streak there. Then we move into JDS. Now this is a legendary win streak. TKO's Fabricio Verdum, TKO's Stefan Struve, TKO's fucking Mirko Krokop, Gilbert Ivel. Underrated, by the way, underrated. He's a legend, but maybe at that time it wasn't the best one over Gilbert Ivel, but he TKO'd him. TKO's Gabriel Gonzaga, beats Roy Nelson by decision, beats Shane Carwin. Shane Carwin is an underrated fighter. He's always very underrated. Beats him, KO's prime Cain Velasquez, and then KO's Frank Mir. That is an awesome win streak. Like, truly legendary one. A couple of the names you have there, and it's a long one as well. It's an 8-fight win streak, captured the belt along the way there. Like I said, knocks out prime Cain Velasquez. Beats Shane Carwin. He was a scary man at that time, right? Mirko Krokop may not have been prime Mirko Krokop, but it wasn't far removed from prime Mirko Krokop. Fabricio Verdum as well, very underrated win. That is a fantastic win streak right there. I would say it's almost deserving of being put in A tier. In fact, I am going to put that in A tier. But then we have Fedor Emelianenko. Now his is so long, so lengthy, that I couldn't just take a screenshot of it because it would just be too big of a screenshot and the pixels would be all fucked up. So I had to record it. That's how long this win streak is. And based off the length of it, the fact that some of these wins, like I said, Fedor Emelianenko was fighting during the tournament era, right? When people say that Fedor Emelianenko's resume is not that impressive, well, he only beat this guy or that guy. Yes, he did beat some fighters who were not nearly on his level, but then in between those, he was beating real killers, legend of the sport, right? His fight versus Mirko Krokop is potentially even still to this day the biggest fight of all time based on attendance, right? That fight was massive at that time. It may still be the biggest fight of all time. It has some real like serious wins along the way. Yes, he beat some Japanese fighters who shouldn't have been in there, absolutely, who he was just better than. But he did beat some serious guys. And even then, you're fighting that many times, just winning that many fights over the course of 10 or so years, right? That's a legendary run. And if you're fighting multiple times in one night, you're winning Grand Prix along the way. You know what I mean? That's impressive. That's such a risky thing to do. And it's the reason why so many of these older fighters have kind of mixed records, is because they were fighting everybody and they were fighting multiple times in one night. And so many things can happen, injuries, this and that. Fedor Emelianenko managed to put together a win streak of that magnitude during that time. That's crazy. Fedor Emelianenko is S tier on this list. And then we get Khabib with probably the most top-heavy win streak here. The RDA win was very good. I agree, it's good. The Edson Barbosa win, it's good, but stylistic mismatch completely. Okay, right? Michael Johnson, alrighty. But really, when you look at Khabib's win streak, you're looking at the top of it. You're looking at Conor McGregor. You're looking at Dustin Poirier. You're looking at Justin Gaethje. So it's good. It's good. But then he retired off that Justin Gaethje win. I understand why he did. I get that. This is a real tough one here, man. It's a real tough one. But I'm going to rank Khabib in C tier for that win streak. Right? He beat 3 top contenders who were stylistic mismatches for him. They never defended against someone who could fucking wrestle. So listen, man, I'm not overly impressed by it, but then again, he's on this list. So by definition, he has one of the best win streaks of all time. So all you Khabib dick riders out there, feel free to cry in the comment section below. But then we have Daniel Cormier. Very underrated win streak. Having said that, though, very short one, right? So it's hard to really rank it. And there are a couple of overlapping names in there as well. You have 2 wins over Anthony Johnson. Listen, man, I cannot understate how crazy a win or 2 wins over Anthony Johnson were back then. He was the boogeyman. He was a scary dude. But then again, it's 2 wins over Anthony Johnson, but 2 rear naked chokes, right? 2 finishes over the scary Anthony Johnson. A split decision win in a banger of a fight with prime Gustafsson, right? That's an underrated win. And then a short notice win over Anderson Silva. Anderson Silva, who took the fight on short notice. And this was before he was washed. And he looked good in this fight, Anderson Silva. But it was mostly Daniel Cormier here. So based off the names alone, it's a crazy win streak. But it's only 4. It's only 4. So it's tough to rank it much higher than D tier. Yeah, I'm going to put it D tier on this list. Then again, DC, man, one of the most underrated fighters of all time. And that win streak is so impressive, dude. Just have 2 finishes over Anthony Johnson. Like, Jon Jones can't even say he has a win over Anthony Johnson, man. Although he probably would have beaten him. But rest in peace, Anthony Johnson. Motherfucker's a legend. Oh, then we have one people will not be happy to see me include on this list. And it's Chris Weidman. But we have to be objective here. This man does have a crazy, crazy, crazy win streak behind him. He really does. Take a look at this, man. Damian Maia. Mark Munoz, awesome KO, by the way, right? The elbow, the step-in elbow, the counter elbow, man, such precision, beautiful. Chris Weidman was good in his prime, dude. But then 2 wins over Anderson Silva. When we have to look at those wins, right? The first one, Anderson Silva probably would have beaten him if he was locked in, but he was showboating, he got clipped, right? It's Anderson Silva's fault, but it does kind of make the victory less impressive than it would be otherwise. And then Anderson Silva breaks his leg. But then he goes on to beat Lyoto Machida and Vitor Belfort by TKO. Okay, so that's a fantastic win streak right there. It is. It's fucking fantastic. But the Anderson Silva wins, even though having 2 wins over Anderson Silva by TKO or KO, right, it's impressive on paper. There's asterisks. And Lyoto Machida wasn't exactly washed up at that time. Vitor Belfort, was that after the TRT era? May have been in and around the TRT era. Maybe it was just prior to it. I'm not too sure. I'm going to put that C tier because of the asterisks on the Anderson Silva victories alone. Otherwise, he could honestly be fucking like B or even A tier if it wasn't for that. But if I don't know, just it's subjective. You guys let me know what you think, man. Then we have Israel Adesanya. Now, as far as things go, I'll put him in B tier right now. He did put some really great wins together on his title run. He did absolutely. I think, you could argue that maybe his win streak is a little bit overrated. You could probably argue that. Let's take a look, man. Like Marvin Vettori, split decision. Oh, he probably just deserved to win the fight outright. But Brad Tavares in a fun fight. TKO's Derek Brunson. It's still one of my favorite. Probably is my favorite performance from Izzy. He really styled on Derek Brunson. And then in Anderson Silva, unanimous decision, washed Anderson Silva. It was a spar. It wasn't even a fight. Kelvin Gastelum went all the way with the refrigerator, man. It's a bad look, but it was such an amazing fight that I don't give a shit. It was a great fight and great win. And I do tend to bump fighters up on lists like this if they deliver great fights along the way, and actually go to war. Then he KOs Robert Whittaker, beats Yoel Romero in a fight that he probably shouldn't have even won, man. He really won that fight with leg kicks. Even though Romero landed the bigger shots, he won the fight with leg kicks and backpedaling. And then a TKO over Paulo Costa, who was undefeated at the time, but is it as impressive, or does it look as impressive now as it did back then? Definitely not. This is one of the cases of a win aging pretty badly, but he still did take the O from Paulo Costa, so maybe that was the reason why Paulo Costa fell off a cliff. because he lost the O and that undefeated mindset, right? So it's a good win streak. It is good. It's actually very good. And I would honestly say that, honestly speaking, if you take away the potential robbery of Yoel Romero, it is on par. It is on par with Islam Makhachev's current win streak. My voice cracked again, dude. What is going on with me? I'm going through puberty again, dude. You just fucking voice cracked again. That's crazy. Dude, this is very tough. But as things stand, I'll rank it at C tier. C tier as things stand right now. But speaking of Robert the Reaper Whittaker, man, he deserves this little shout here too. He does. He deserves a little shout for that Derek Brunson, Jacare Souza, and then 2 victories over Yoel Romero. But Yoel Romero deserved to maybe win that split decision. But then he missed weight, so who gives a shit anyway? He wins the fight, but then doesn't get the belt. That would be the weirdest look. But then again, it is potentially true. Maybe he deserved to win that fight. But I would just say having 2 wins over Yoel Romero, both of which he actually went to war and went into the fire with Yoel Romero. No one else is willing to do that except for him. So it has to bump you up. But then Jacare, Derek Brunson, alrighty. For me, it's very impressive. He beat the boogeymen of the division on his run. But 4 wins, obviously having 2 over Yoel Romero does a lot of heavy lifting. But Jacare at that time was so scary. Yeah, I'm going to put it D tier, but that's not at all a slight to how impressive the win streak really was at the end of the day. It was still incredibly impressive, and there's no really denying that, right? But then we have Kamaru Usman. Now I'll stick him in beats here as things stand, but I'm not too sure how to weigh up his win streak. It's tough. It's tough because I feel like similarly to Israel Adesanya, maybe he just benefited from welterweight being a bit weak back then, because you think about who he had to go through, right? Like 2 victories over Jorge Masvidal. I'm sorry, but that's just not impressive. 2 victories over Colby Covington. Colby Covington, who has no wins over anybody ranked in the UFC. I mean, like, if you go look, even retrospectively, go back and look at Colby Covington's record and his resume. It's not very impressive. But of course, a win over Prime Tyron Woodley, who's one of the greatest 170-pounders of all time, is very impressive. Gilbert Burns, let's not pretend like Gilbert Burns wasn't being picked by many to actually go out there and beat Kamaru Usman. He was considered to be a nightmare matchup for Usman. And after being dropped in the first round, Usman just put the fucking jab on him and completely broke him down with that singular weapon. It was a very impressive performance, honestly. And yeah, you know what, man? It's a good resume. It's a good win streak. Is it better than Israel Adesanya's? Maybe. Because there aren't really any robberies to look at here. There's no real asterisks on this record. Or on this win streak at all. It's just straight dominance from Kamaru. But 2 wins over Colby Covington and 2 wins over Jorge Masvidal does not do a lot for it, does it? It really doesn't do a lot for this win streak. So I'll probably have to bump it down. I'm going to have to bump it down, man. He can sit right next to his boy, Israel Adesanya. Yeah, I'll bump it down right there. Then we have Alexandre Pantoja. Now, this is such a tough one for me because people will always underrate this win streak just simply because he's a flyweight and people don't rate these fighters. But this is yet another example. Like this is essentially the flyweight equivalent of what Merab has done. It's the flyweight equivalent. Manel Kape ages wonderfully, right? I know he just pulled out once again another fight, so let's just not speak about Manel Kape anymore. But Brandon Royval, another victory that ages wonderfully. Alex Perez, he's been in and around the top of the flyweight for many, many years now. Neck crank submits him as well, right? Split decision win over Brandon Moreno. For me, it should have been unanimous. I thought it was clear that Pantoja won that. Brandon Moreno, one of the best flyweights of all time. Another win over Brandon Royval, right? Which ages beautifully once again because Brandon Royval pretty much beats everybody else. In fact, he picked up a win over Brandon Moreno. So I think that win ages even better now. But then Steve Erceg and Kaya Sakura, right? 2 guys who were pushed towards him way too quickly. And I know Steve Erceg did well, but look how he's done since then. He was clearly just pushed too quickly. And Kaya Sakura, I think we learned, had no business being in there with him. But realistically, he did clear out the division with this win streak right here. Relatively so. Of course, there are more contenders coming up. But I think as things stand, that is almost the equivalent of what Merab has done. Just not quite as impressive because you look at some of those names at the top, right? Steve Erceg, Kaya Sakura, Alex Perez, right? Takes away from it a bit. But man, Brandon Royval, Brandon Moreno, Manel Kape along the way. Just beautiful, beautiful win streak. But I'll move it down to beats here. But I want to give respect to Pantoja here because I think he might be the best flyweight of all time. I think he might be. Then we get Dominick Cruz. Dominick Cruz. Now, this is a tough one. I know everyone's talking, I keep saying that, but I know everyone's talking about Merab being the bantamweight GOAT because he is. He is the bantamweight GOAT. But where does Dominick Cruz stack up, right? Especially when you look at his best run, right? His best win streak. Let's take a look here. 2 wins over Joseph Benavidez, Brian Bowles, right? Scott Jorgensen. I think Scott Jorgensen was the guy with vitiligo or something, right? Where he had the pigmentation issue in his skin, right? 2 wins over Uriah Faber. Demetrious Johnson in there too, but you guys have to remember that this was 135 Demetrious Johnson early in his career. So the name looks fantastic on the record, but it's not as special as it may seem. Takeo Mizugaki, who was underrated win, TKO'd him or KO'd him, and then a very close decision victory over TJ Dillashaw after returning from the knee injury. So I'll say, right, there are some legendary names on here, multiple wins over Uriah Faber and Joseph Benavidez, the TJ Dillashaw win, right, Demetrious Johnson win, very, very impressive. It's very hard for me. I'm not even really sure how to rank this, but I'm just not as impressed with it as I am the Merab win streak. It's just not as impressive, although it is very impressive. And you have to consider the fact that he performed that well against Dillashaw after the long layoff and the knee surgery, and it's so legendary. So for that reason, I'm actually going to keep Dominick Cruz's win streak, his best win streak, at B tier. Right, the asterisk is there, and he even came back and he got that second victory over Uriah Faber to solidify his dominance over these Team Alpha Male guys. We won't talk about Cody Garbrandt, though. We won't talk about him. Then we get Amanda Nunez. I'm going to stick it here. I'm sticking it right there without even thinking about it. Because you know what about Amanda Nunez? I know we don't like to talk about the female win streaks or the female fighters, for that matter, very often. But if we're being completely objective, obviously Shayna Baszler, who gives a shit, Sarah McMahon, who gives a shit, 2 wins over Valentina Shevchenko, a win over Miesha Tate, a TKO over Ronda Rousey, Raquel Pennington, Chris Cyborg, Holly Holm, Jermaine Durandamy, Felicia Spencer, Megan Anderson, who gives a shit about those ones. But at the end of the day, right, you look at Cyborg, Holly Holm, Pennington, Valentina Shevchenko, twice. One of those at least should have been a victory for Shevchenko. Let's be completely honest here. Miesha Tate, right, these are a bunch of champions. And she essentially beat the greatest fighters of all time other than herself in that division. And at 145, I believe, too, right? Megan Anderson. I think that was a victory at 145. Maybe the Jermaine Durandamy one as well. But shit, dude. Say what you want about Amanda Nunez. Say what you want about the female divisions. We can't deny how legendary her run as champion really was, right? And along the way, defending both belts, I think, too. Correct? I believe both belts. It just sucks that she had to end that streak with Juliana Pena, man. If she ended off that streak with 2 wins or maybe just 1 win, because if she beat Juliana Pena the first time, we wouldn't have even been speaking about Juliana Pena going forward. But unfortunately, she lost that one. But yeah, man, legendary title run for her. Amazing win streak. Just fantastic. Then we get Jon Bones Jones. Guys, oh boy, people are going to hate this one. Just hate the fact that I even am speaking about Jon Jones in any light. But we'll be objective here, right? Let's actually look through the victories and not just pay attention to the names themselves, right? We'll try our very best to be objective here. Jon Jones, let's stick him at A tier as things stand, right? We have Ryan Bader, who I believe was undefeated at that time. Mauricio Shogun Rua, who he beat to win the belt, right? Credit to him. He beat him to win the belt, but this was Shogun after his Pride days, right? Somewhat washed up, but still not outside of his age where you would be at your prime. He was 29 at the time. Rampage Jackson choked him out, but like I said, man, or like I've said before, Shogun Rua, Lyoto Machida, Quinton Rampage Jackson, these are all kind of like glorified middleweights. He was just so much bigger than them at the time. Lyoto Machida, though, one of the coldest fucking submissions you'll ever see in your life. Dominant victory over Rashad Evans. Submits TRT Belfort. TKO's Chael Sonnen. Don't care, right? Beats Gustafsson in a very close fight. Glover Teixeira, right? Beats him. Ages very well. The win over Daniel Cormier. Oben St. Peru. Like the names on this list. But because of the cloud hanging over Jon Jones' head and just thinking whether or not he was on some shit and the fact that a lot of these wins were over undersized people outside of their prime, older guys coming up, and the fact that he's talking about how he's old now, doesn't want to fight the younger Tom Aspinall as a result. Nah, Jon Jones. We're making a new tier for you. Let's just give me a moment. So I will acknowledge the sheer number of legendary names on the list, but then again, he is Jon Jones and he is a duck. So we're just going to stick him here. But you guys, like this is a fun game, right? You guys can just place him wherever you want other than Duck. If you think he should be DCBAS, let me know. But as far as I'm concerned, he simply only deserves Duck. But then we get into Charles Oliveira. And I'll put it at B tier as things stand because his title run was truly a legendary one. I'm actually a very big fan of Charles Oliveira's run. It was paved in blood and violence and against really high-level guys. Like, let's take a look, man. Clay Guida, Christos Giagos, Jim Miller, David Tamer. I know these aren't super impressive names, maybe aside from Clay Guida and Jim Miller, but Nick Lentz, Jared Gordon, then it gets pretty hot. You got Kevin Lee, but then Tony Ferguson. I think that was washed Tony Ferguson. It wasn't after he was knocked up by Chandler or anything, but he was still washed Ferguson at that point. You could just see it in his performance. TKO's Michael Chandler. Impressive, I guess. Maybe at that time more so than now. And then submits with the rear naked choke both Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje. So the win streak is cool. It's lengthy. It's beautiful. Like his whole title run it's a thing of legend. But I would say that the win streak itself is quite top heavy. I would say that the top two names are the only ones that I'm overly impressed with. So for that reason, I would say the length of it bumps it. And it's Charles Oliveira, right? His whole run was just so sick. So I'll keep it at B tier. I think B tier is pretty fair here. Then we get Demetrious Johnson. Very hard one here because he's given shit kinda by a lot of fans for, I guess, the lack of competition that he went up against, but you can only fight the guys who were available at the time, so it's hard to say, right? But Ian McCall and Joseph Benavidez, they were high-ranked guys at the time. Ian McCall was pretty good. He had a cool mustache. John Dodson was really good in his heyday. He could have been a champion if not for Demetrious Johnson. Don't forget, he did finish TJ Dillashaw in The Ultimate Fighter to get a contract, right? Joseph Benavidez, and again, John Moraga, Ali Bagatinov, Chris Cariaso, Kyoji Haraguchi, John Dodson again. Then you get the TKO over Henry Cejudo, Tim Elliott, Wilson Reese, Ray Borg. So because of the sheer length of it and the sheer dominance of it, it's very impressive. And a lot of these names just won't stick out to a lot of people because the level of flyweight was much lower back then. It was. And Demetrious Johnson, I would say, was similar to a champion like Amanda Nunez, to where the discrepancy in skill was just so large, like so clearly humongous between him and the rest of the division that it kind of seemed unfair. So for that reason, I'm actually going to bump him down to C tier. I'm bumping it down to C tier. The length of it does propel it a little bit, but like I said, he was just so much better than everyone else, right? If we're talking about title reigns alone, then Demetrious Johnson's up there for sure, but just the win streak, like, I get it. He did beat a lot of guys, but I guess the wins don't really age that well. But like I said, man, he does. But nah, based on the length of the win streak and the dominance involved with it, I'm going to bump it up to B tier. It is a very impressive win streak. He's considered the flyweight GOAT by many for a very good reason, man. And for that reason, yeah, he should be there. But then we get Anderson Silva. Anderson the Spider Silva. Now, he's in a very similar boat to that of Demetrious Johnson, if you think about it, right? Fought during a time when people look back retrospectively and see the names and think, who the fuck was that guy? Who was that guy? Who was that guy? Right? He beat so many guys, but many people aren't really privy to who these individuals were. But of course, just to prove how good he is, right? Because that's what I look for in these win streaks. I really, really look for those big names, like those very impressive names kind of littered in between, right? Like a Fedor. Fedor wasn't just beating bums. He beat a couple of bums maybe, but then at the same time, he also put together wins against very impressive competition to show you that he isn't a can crusher, that he is a really good fighter. And I think same thing goes for Anderson Silva, right? And he did come in to the UFC like much later in his career, right? Much later. He wasn't even really in his physical prime at that time. But he did pick up wins over Vitor Belfort, Dan Henderson, right? Stephan Bonner. He did have some impressive wins. So I think similarly to Demetrious Johnson, the length of win streak is what's most impressive about it overall. But, it was so legendary. It was such a legendary run. And he did beat some seriously good guys along the way, didn't he? Stylistic mismatches as well. Does he deserve to be above Demetrious? Yeah, man, he does. I'm keeping him at A. I feel like it would be disrespectful to put him below A, just the sheer length of it. But then again, if I'm putting him at A, should I not put Demetrious at A as well? Yes, I should, man. The length of it. It's so hard to win fight after fight after fight after fight, right? As a champion, to hold on to that belt and continue that reign, it's really hard to do such a thing. It is. But then again, guys like Anderson Silva and Demetrious Johnson didn't have to fight as many fights before getting their shots at the title. You know what I mean? But Anderson Silva had a pretty lengthy career outside the UFC, so he had some years on him even before the UFC days at the same time. So you know what I mean? I'm just going to stop fucking trying to think too deeply about this. No, they're both A tier. They're both legendary. Let's just leave it at that. But I also included Glover Teixeira here. And the reason for that is mostly because of the age that he was at the time. He just made the biggest career turnaround, right? Carl Robertson, Ian Cutelaba made him tap, beat Nikita Krylov in a pretty close fight, TKO's Anthony Smith, finishes Thiago Santos, and then wins the belt over Jan Blachowicz. So all of this has to do with the fact that Glover Teixeira went on this run at the age that he went on this run at. It's as simple as that. And for that reason, I wanted to include them on the list, even though I am going to rank him at D tier. And then we get Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira, his 205 run. 205 run, extremely violent. The split decision, very close win over Jan Blachowicz. I think he deserved to get it. A lot of people think he didn't. 2 finishes over Yuri Prochazka, who no one else can finish, by the way. So for me, those wins are very impressive. A finish over Jamal Hill, who was maybe overrated to begin with. And then a finish over Khalil Roundtree, which is a close fight. But, mostly finishes very violent. Although for me, as much as I love Alex Pereira, only good enough to rank at D tier. But no one could take away from the fact that he essentially saved the UFC last year with all of those title defenses, like short notice fights, everything. The man is so incredibly active. Then we get Igor Vovchanchyn, fucking 35 fight win streak over the course of years and years and years. And yes, it was during a time when MMA was simpler and guys weren't as skilled. But Igor Vovchanchyn was in a similar boat. He wasn't as skilled, but the man had hammers in his hands. And remaining undefeated for that long, across that many fights during the tournament era, when he was sometimes knocking dudes out one after one in a singular night, like I said about Fedor Emelianenko or Shogun Rua, any of these dudes who put win streaks like this together during that time, you simply cannot rank these win streaks anywhere below S tier. These are legendary runs that I will do my best to make sure that nobody forgets about them. And I would recommend going back and watching some Igor Vovchanchyn fights. Watch him during that long win streak that he went on. This is a legendary win streak, and arguably, down to the sheer length of it alone, and I get it, right? There aren't a whole lot of names that you may recognize on that list, but 35 fight win streak, sometimes fighting multiple times in one night. Get out of here. If you're gonna talk about he beat cans only, I don't give a shit. I want to see someone else win 35 fights in a row. And then you look at some of the names, they weren't all cans. Maybe some of them were, but some of them were legitimate names to let you know that Igor Vovchanchyn was not a can crusher, like I say. But then we have last but not least, maybe least actually, but he can't be least, right? Because the sheer length of that win streak, dude, Jon Fitch. And I believe that his inclusion here only bumps up GSP as having the best win streak of all time, because Jon Fitch had his 16-fight win streak cracked by GSP, right? After that Chris Wilson win, he ran into GSP and got completely dominated everywhere. Got dropped multiple times. So there were some unimpressive names there for sure, right? Mike Seal is kind of an underrated name, right? I'll do my best here to boost up this one. Diego Sanchez as well, right? Split decision, but still prime Diego Sanchez. Even TKO'd a prime juiced up Thiago Alves, and I get a lot of the other names in this list aren't very impressive, but he did maintain this win streak for 16 fights, right? Across 16 fights. That's impressive. It's just a really, really long win streak with not a whole lot of great names on it. But it's so long, though. It's one of the longest ones on this list to begin with. So should that bump it up? Should it be D tier? I get he wasn't actually beating the best fighters in the world. Ooh, man, I don't know where to put it. Shit. Yeah, but he does have Alves and Sanchez there, dude, to prove that he was not a can crusher. But C tier is the best I can do for Jon Fitch. Man, if there was a spot like maybe in between C and D, that's exactly where he would be for me. But I just don't feel right about putting a 16-fight win streak, even though there were some, less than recognizable names there. Still, 16 fights is damn impressive. But he's C tier. And that does conclude my thoughts on the greatest win streaks of all time. Please let me know in the comment section below what you think, whether you agree, whether you disagree, what your favorite win streak of all time is, who you think is most deserving of having the most legendary win streak of all time. Please let me know in the comment section below, guys. Any of your thoughts, I always appreciate it. Anyway, guys, I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you on the next one.